I am the Demon Hunter Master, I need to pay extra. Introduction. After the unexpected death of Private Detective Song Yuan, he was reborn into the world of demon hunters and became a lone snake school demon hunter named Frank, a survivor of Sintra, and a novice demon hunter without even a demon hunter badge. However, as a person living in a peaceful era, he is not interested in world domination or racial opposition, nor does he have a hot face and cold buttocks to help those despicable villagers hunt monsters. As a former detective, Frank only wants to use his mind and methods, utilize his extraordinary skills, earn the benefits he deserves, and ensure his life. So, in the world of demon hunters, there is an inconspicuous detective society, and in the perception of some people, there is an expensive demon hunter master in the world. As Frank continued to explore various cases, he gradually discovered that the world of this demon hunter was far more terrifying than he had imagined. Chapter 1. The Trading of Female Demons. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Song Yuan found himself dreaming, a very special dream. In his dream, he became the young man named Frank. Born in the kingdom of Sintra, with parents passing away early, lonely and homeless, wandering between the city and the countryside, seeking to survive in the contempt and charity of others, life is a bleak one. After struggling in pain for several years, a demon hunter who wandered to the kingdom of Sintra saved him, and young Frank smoothly transformed from an orphan to a demon hunter apprentice. The rest of life, like a glimmer of light in the darkness, is always spent on training with bruises all over, drinking bad-tasting potions, stumbling through reading and literacy, learning various uninteresting knowledge of demon hunters. But at least, his life is no longer lonely, he doesn't have to go hungry anymore, and there is another person who cares about him. However, this warm life did not last long. Before Frank could complete all the training for the demon hunters, his teacher suddenly disappeared without any news. And soon after, he himself was attacked by a group of unknown robbers, seriously injured, and fell into a cliff. The dreamlike memory came to an abrupt end here, and Song Yuan didn't know how long he had been sleeping in this dream. In a moment of confusion, he suddenly realized that he had probably been reborn from the legendary sacrifice. He vividly remembers that in his past life, as a private detective, he had died unexpectedly in a heroic act and was stabbed in the vital area with a sharp knife. Due to his severe injuries, rescue efforts were ineffective. Just for some unknown reason, there was a force in the dark that made him a young demon hunter named Frank and took over his body. Once this perception was established, the feeling of falling into a dream quickly dissipated. When Song Yuan's consciousness left the dream and regained control of his new body, various bodily senses reconnected to his brain, allowing him to perceive the external environment. The damp air, cold slate, and soil mixed with the scent of grass lingered under his nose, and strands of slightly chilly breeze brushed against his skin, making him realize that he was currently naked. Frank's body trembled slightly, and he opened his eyes with some difficulty. However, before he could see the surroundings clearly, he suddenly realized that his underwear had been stripped off, and there was a warm and comfortable feeling. The area surrounding his body was as hard as iron. He is quite familiar with this feeling. As a private detective, he used to interact with people from all walks of life, always coming and going between various clubs and dinners, often dealing with skilled women, and occasionally going to bars and nightclubs to try his luck. He can definitely be considered experienced. Although the person beneath him felt different, the sensory stimulation made him shiver uncontrollably. At the same time, a feeling of confusion arose naturally. What the hell is going on? He just crossed over and his pants were ripped off. What's the beginning of this? Sigh. Although Frank didn't dislike this feeling, he couldn't help but prop up half of his body, looking under him with a bit of nervousness. If the other party is a beautiful woman, then it's easy to say that if you suffer some losses, it's not a big deal. But if the other person is a tough guy or a pervert, then it's really a dog in the sun and it's likely to become a lifelong shadow. Fortunately, what caught the eye was a beautiful and charming face. Black long hair, big eyes, emerald green eyes paired with a tall nose bridge, cherry lips slightly open, extending a tongue that is about twice as long as an ordinary woman. It can still flexibly curl up into a ball, constantly wriggling like a snake, making people unable to help but yearn. Damn it, he can't even imagine what it would feel like to be served by this tongue. But what surprised Frank even more was that this beautiful female creature had two curved horns on its head, resembling cow horns. Her skin was slightly pale, and she was wearing a thin long shirt, half kneeling on the ground, revealing her devilish figure. As the female creature moved, Frank felt some kind of energy in his body slowly being absorbed by the other person in a special way. Although it was not beneficial to his body, there was a refreshing sensation of pouring out. I'm afraid, like the plot of some fox demon female ghosts, the other party seems to be absorbing his yang energy. In almost the blink of an eye, Frank came to the conclusion from his previous knowledge of demon hunters that they were not humans, but rather a rather rare succubus. What she is currently doing is what enchanters love the most, sucking on the vitality of male creatures. Although this behavior will not directly harm the lives of the parties involved and only make them weak for a period of time, Frank still couldn't help but struggle to get up and keep himself away from the female succubus. Just kidding, although the other person makes him very comfortable, the succubus is not human, and there are also many succubus who feed on human flesh and blood. However, just as he moved his body, he immediately felt a sharp pain in his chest and abdomen, and even his thighs seemed to be experiencing intense pain due to a fracture. Frank only then noticed that there were traces of bandaging treatment on his abdomen, chest, and multiple parts of his body. A pungent herbal scent was slowly wafting out from those injured areas. Based on the memories from his previous dreams, it is evident that his body suffered quite serious injuries from the attacks of the robbers and the subsequent fall into the cliff. And it is very likely that the demon in front of him is the one who is treating these injuries. You're seriously injured, it's best not to move around. The movement of his body just now seemed to disturb the other person's eating. When Frank lifted his eyes and looked at the enchanting creature again, he looked for the beautiful creature with two black horns at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, tilted his head, and his intoxicated expression slightly restrained. She looked at Frank with emerald green eyes, her voice calm, with a hint of awkwardness and unfamiliarity that had not been spoken to for a long time. There was neither hostility nor much other emotion in his eyes, and there was no shame in his expression because he had been caught stealing food, as if he was doing what was supposed to happen. You have been unconscious for 3 days, and I saved you in the valley. Based on your injuries, you should need to rest for a long time before you can move around. Realizing the serious injury on his body, Frank knew he couldn't be the opponent of this succubus right now. Fortunately, the other person's attitude was relatively friendly and didn't seem to have any intention of harming him. So, while observing the other person's expression, he cautiously said, "Thank you for saving me, this succubus lady. Since my body is very weak and needs cultivation, could you please temporarily refrain from consuming my vital energy?" Upon hearing Frank's words, the succubus did not stop its movements. Instead, it calmly licked a few more bites and then, quite intoxicated, withdrew its slender tongue, answering, "I saved your life, you must repay me, this is my rightful right. But don't worry, your vitality makes me feel happy, I won't let your life be in danger. I will also heal your injury, provide you with food and protection, and you must provide me with 30 times worth of vitality. This is a beneficial transaction for you. If you refuse, I will drive you out of the temple and no longer provide you with food and protection." Chapter 2. Sacred Objects. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. After listening to Miss Charm's words, Frankton felt a pang of bitterness in his heart. With his current physical condition, if he were thrown into the wilderness, it would basically be a dying outcome. With the quality of the indigenous people in the wizarding world that he understands, no one would raise a seriously injured patient for no reason without profit. Moreover, he is a demon hunter who dislikes dogs and is prone to trouble. However, the life.Saving kindness indeed needs to be repaid. Since Miss Mayma has said that she will not harm his life and will also treat his injuries, her request can be said to be generous and compassionate. Frank found it difficult to refuse such a reasonable request and could only prepare to sacrifice his color scheme to ensure his own safety. Although I don't know which great deity gave him another chance to live, he doesn't want his life to end so soon, even if it may just be an illusory dream. He also wants to continue living. Your request is very reasonable, madam. I should repay your kindness. However, I still hope that you can tolerate it for a while and provide you with the vitality after my body recovers. A man with abundant physical strength and good health should better meet your requirements than a patient lying in bed. And please rest assured that I am a demon hunter. If you can provide me with some medicinal materials, my body's recovery speed will be several times faster than that of ordinary humans, and I won't let you wait too long. Frank spoke pleasantries and felt like a self-promoting cowherd, relying on selling his body to pray for the care of a wealthy woman. Upon hearing this, Miss Mayma blinked in confusion and asked with a tone of confusion. Monster hunters. I've never heard of them before. Is this something new that has only emerged in the past few hundred years? Well, you can call me Yaobed. I am the chief judge of this temple of the night goddess. I just woke up from my slumber and haven't had a chance to learn too much about the current world. After saying these few words, Miss Charm did not continue to absorb Frank's vitality. She stood up from a half-kneeling position and turned towards a stone wardrobe in the corner of the room. Sleepy. Hundreds of years. Night goddess. After listening to Yaobed's words, Frank was taken aback for a moment, but soon his gaze was unconsciously drawn to the figure of the chief adjudicator. Full chest, delicate small waist, peach-like buttocks, slightly swaying white tail, occasionally revealing fair skin from loose linen clothes, as well as curled hooves and thick black horns on the top of the head. These exotic features have inexplicable appeal to modern people like him who only inherit the memory of the original owner. At the same time, he also remembered the venerable name of the night goddess in his mind. Frank currently does not know which deity this honorific name refers to. In the wizarding world, each deity has a different title based on the race and language of its followers, as well as the region they are located in. In addition, there are many unknown evil gods whose names are diverse and peculiar, and the number of people who know them is quite limited. Throughout the long history, many deities and their followers have been submerged in the dust of time. Just like the goddess Meridatelli, who has the most followers in the north, her revered name may exceed 2 digits. From the kingdom of Cordwin in the north to the Skellig Islands overseas, humans, dwarves, and elves all refer to this deity in almost different ways. From the words of this chief adjudicator, it seems that she has not had any contact with human society for a long time, and has not even heard of the famous demon hunters. It seems that she, like the deities she believes in, are both very mysterious beings. A few seconds later, Yaobed handed Frank a simple style linen shirt with a red metal ring that looked quite ancient on top. The succubus's gaze flickered over Frank's strong muscles before finally reluctantly licking her red lips and looking at him, saying, "If you don't want to repay now, I can wait a while longer. However, as a condition, you must add 2 more times to make up for my cost." It seems that this enchanting young lady has not absorbed her life energy for a long time, and almost every word she says does not leave this matter. Your clothes have been completely damaged by blood, water, and dirt. Apart from that broken iron sword, this ring should be the only one with recycling value. However, this is a quite dangerous artifact that seems to come from some evil deity. Since you have established a contract with it, you must be careful when using it. At least, don't die until I've paid off my debt. Holy artifact. Gods. Contract. After hearing these words, Frankton felt a bit confused again. He had played 3 games in the Wizarding series and had some basic understanding of the original story, but he had never heard of the so-called holy artifacts. Taking the clothes handed to him by Yalbed, Frank's gaze lingered on the quaint red ring for more than 10 seconds, without noticing its uniqueness or even feeling any trace of magic. However, since the chief adjudicator stated that he had already signed a contract with this sacred artifact ring, for safety reasons, Frank felt it was best to first inquire. "Ms. Yalbed, please forgive my ignorance. Can you tell me what a sacred artifact is? This is an item that my teacher brought back a month ago, and he disappeared afterwards. I have no idea what makes this ring special." Upon hearing this, Yalbed raised his eyebrows in surprise, then picked up the ring and handed it to Frank, saying, "It seems that you haven't used it yet, but it's okay. You have established a connection with it at Shuyuan www.jiaoshuyuan.com, and you can't get rid of it until your life is over. The sacred artifact bestowed by the deity will choose its appropriate owner, and those who can sign a contract with it are those who are favored by this deity. Put it on your finger, it's a magical ring that will tell you how to use it." Frank hesitated for a few seconds upon hearing this, guessing that Yalbed might not harm him, so he reached out and took the ring. And as soon as his fingers touched the ring, a mechanical sound echoed in his mind, leaving him stunned on the spot. Ding! Contact the power of the source, reading information, do you draw strength? Before Frank could sort out his thoughts and decide whether to draw, a very simple attribute panel appeared before his eyes, just like many games do, simple and clear. Frank Gustavo Race. Demon Hunter Strength. 1.8, Agility. 2.1, Physical Fitness. 1.6, Spirit. 2.4, the attributes of ordinary humans range from 0.6 to 1.2, Ability. Swordsmanship of the Viper School, regular level, Demon Hunter Seal, entry. Level. At the same time, Frank's eyes underwent a transformation, and a chaotic memory followed the ring in his hand and directly entered his brain. That is the scene when the previous generations of owners of this ring used it, including nobles and wealthy merchants, ordinary farmers, as well as elves and dwarves. The memory is very messy, mostly consisting of a few images, and there is not much information revealed. However, in the end, the owners of these rings did not live to the end, either completely falling into madness or dying in certain battles or accidents. Chapter 3. The Ring of Blood. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, 3 days passed quickly. After a brief period of cultivation and treatment with Swallow Potion, Frank's body barely recovered, at least not even struggling to move his body. During these few days, he reorganized the memories in his mind and reviewed all the knowledge and abilities about the demon hunters that may depend on for survival in the future, to be careful not to forget them. However, to Frank's surprise, after a few days of interaction, he found that Yalbed, the chief judge of the night goddess, seemed to have quite good combat power. Not only can she hunt various wild beasts alone in the wilderness, bring back enough meat and wild vegetables every day, but she can also obtain the magic potion materials entrusted to her by herself, such as water ghost brain and white chew flower. This allowed him to refine a swallow potion for himself, accelerating the recovery of his injuries. You should know that although water ghosts are not very powerful, a well-trained soldier can deal with one or two alone. But these disgusting monsters often live in groups, and even many skilled demon hunters may be seriously injured by a group of water ghosts, let alone other ordinary people. He originally only made this request with the intention of trying it out, but Yalbed easily agreed. Although the female succubus later proposed the condition of adding 2 more draws of life energy, Frank believed that this was reasonable, as the debt was not overwhelming, and this condition also met his psychological expectations. As Yalbed went to the temple to pray, Frank silently looked at the sacred artifact ring in his hand, lost in thought. After popping out of the golden finger on the system interface that day, he suppressed the palpitations in his heart and talked to Yalbed for a long time. From this chief adjudicator's mouth, Frank learned more about holy objects. The number of sacred objects is very rare, and most of them are not even known by their names. Moreover, besides the chosen owner of the artifact, it is difficult for others to use these magical props. However, items bestowed by deities containing powerful divine power often bring misfortune to their holders due to their powerful power. So in the perception of ordinary people, these sacred objects can mostly be called cursed or unlucky items, making people avoid them. With the passage of time, information about these sacred artifacts has become increasingly scarce, and even the vast majority of spellcasters are unaware of their existence, making them highly secretive mystical objects. The ring in Frank's hand, truly called the blood ring, comes from a deity revered as the mother of blood and flesh. This holy artifact has a very powerful ability to quickly repair the physical injuries of the holder by absorbing magic. As long as it is not a fatal injury like a head cut off, even a heart rupture and damage to all 5 organs, it can rely on this holy artifact to quickly recover. It can be almost said to be half an immortal body. Of course, the prerequisite is that the holder's magic is strong enough to support and repair the body's damage. If the holder is just an ordinary person who cannot use the chaos magic, then every time they use the blood ring, they consume the holder's life energy. From the memory fragments obtained by Frank, it can be seen that several of the previous owners of this ring had their lives drained and their bodies transformed into monsters, resulting in a very tragic outcome. Moreover, the reason why sacred objects are called cursed objects is not only because of their powerful and strange abilities, but also because they have quite eerie side effects when used. The same goes for the blood ring in Frank's hand. This holy artifact contains the power of the deity revered as the mother of blood and flesh. This name sounds like a deity of an evil god, and every time it uses its power, it makes the holder crave for flesh and blood from the soul, addicted to the pleasure of devouring flesh and blood, and may eventually fall into madness, becoming a monster that devours people, completely losing their rationality. Of course, this is a gradual process with sufficient buffer time. But no matter what, a ring that can quickly treat non-fatal injuries can definitely be called an extremely powerful extraordinary item. Especially for warriors like demon hunters who always wander on the brink of life and death, even if they have significant hidden dangers, they can never give up. However, Frank is now somewhat conflicted, looking at the option prompted on the system panel whether to draw the power of the source. He doesn't know how to choose. According to his understanding, this fundamental power is likely to be the divine power hidden within the blood ring. If one chooses to draw it, it may destroy the ring's ability and turn it into a waste. But if he doesn't choose to draw, he won't be able to experience the ability of the golden finger of system cheating, which is undoubtedly very uncomfortable. After struggling for several days, I noticed that my injury was recovering quite slowly, especially the fracture in my thigh, which was difficult to recover in just a few months. In the end, Frank, feeling uneasy, decided to first use the power of the blood ring to repair his current injury, and then use system cheats to draw the original power from the holy artifact. At the very least, this way there is a bottom line and there won't be nothing in the end. If he wanted to do it, he waited until Yalbed was out hunting and put the blood ring on his right index finger. Following the method shown in the fragments in his memory, he began to activate the blood ring's ability. In an instant, a strange force emerged from the ring and quickly entered his body. Frank felt the chaotic magic in his body rapidly deplete, and the ring in his hand seemed like a bottomless pit, beginning to absorb a large amount of magic. And the wounds on his body seemed to be conscious, quickly healing and forming scars. The broken bones in his thighs also seemed to grow again, and he found Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to reattach them together. Frank saw it very clearly, and in less than 20 seconds, all the wounds on his body had healed, even the thigh fracture had recovered to its original state. This magical scene made him widen his eyes and his heart was shocked beyond measure. I'm afraid even the legendary high-level vampire probably only has this level of recovery ability. I didn't expect that just a ring would have such magical power, which is truly a treasure bestowed by gods. However, before he could fully examine his injuries, Frank suddenly felt a strong hunger surge in his heart, an extreme desire to devour flesh and blood. Like ants on a hot pot, eager and unable to stop. He immediately realized that this was a side effect caused by the blood ring, and that this craving must be curbed by swallowing flesh and blood. Fortunately, at this point, the injury on his thigh had also healed and no longer affected his mobility. So Frank quickly got off the stone bed and went to the small room where Yalbed stored food. He picked up the remaining rabbit and a river fish from yesterday, picked up a small knife on the side, threw away their bodies, and directly ate sashimi. But I don't know if it was due to the influence of this blood ring. Although it was raw meat with a bloody smell, Frank found it exceptionally delicious in his mouth and felt very satisfied inside. In less than 10 minutes, he ate a plump rabbit and a 2-pound river fish. And these flesh and blood that he ate quickly became nutrients in his body under the special power of the blood ring, and were quickly digested. Chapter 4. The Power of the Origin. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. After a bloody meal of animal meat sashimi, the abnormal craving for flesh and blood was quickly relieved. Although the side effects of the blood ring made Frank feel a bit uneasy, the effect of this holy artifact did surprise him. After consuming most of the magic in his body, his injuries have been completely healed, even the broken bones have healed again, like new life, without affecting his normal movements. This effect is something that even advanced sorcerers skilled in healing spells cannot easily achieve. He thought he needed to rest for another month or two before getting out of bed, but now this situation undoubtedly surprises him even more, saving him at least a few months of time. After sighing, Frank sat back on the stone bed and looked at the blood ring in his hand, making up his mind. Since his body has recovered and he has the power to protect himself, he can't help but start imagining whether crossing the built.In system cheats will also bring him greater benefits like a holy artifact. Do whatever you want, he is not a procrastinator, otherwise he would not have become a private detective in his past life, wandering on the edge of various dangers and laws. Frank is still very clear about the principles of seeking wealth insurance. Ding. Does it draw the power of its origin? Looking at the system options that appeared in his mind, he took a deep breath and chose yes. In an instant, Frank felt an irresistible force emerge within him, and then like a bottomless vortex, he began to draw some unknown energy from the blood ring in his hand. This force is extremely eerie. Although its scale is not particularly large, it gives Frank a feeling that it is more dangerous than the chaotic magic in the air, as if it has been condensed dozens of times, making people unable to help but feel intimidated. However, miraculously, after this energy entered his body, it did not act elsewhere or bring any changes to his body. Instead, it disappeared without a trace as if it had been absorbed into his soul. At the same time, in the lower left corner of his system plane, the number representing the power of the origin is also starting to jump wildly. 1%. 5%. 20%. 50%. 100%. In less than 30 seconds, the number representing the power of the origin increased slightly. Then, in 2 minutes, it increased to 2 o'clock, and in 5 minutes, it increased to 3 o'clock. Until the end, around 10 minutes later, the number at the bottom of the system interface remained at 4 o'clock and 53%, no longer increasing. After 10 minutes of drawing, Frank's holy weapon, the blood ring, seemed to have lost some kind of power. From a long-standing antique to an exquisite handicraft, it has shed the luster that precipitates the sense of the times and is no longer as mysterious as in the past. And Frank could still feel that there was still a trace of the original power being continuously drawn from the blood ring. It's like turning a rushing flood into a trickle, although the scale has shrunk by a few hundred times, as long as it lasts long enough, accumulating small amounts makes a lot and accumulating water makes a river, there will definitely be many gains in the future. After absorbing the power of the origin, Frank took a gentle breath and looked at the 4 points of the power of the origin and the 53% progress bar under the system interface, with a hint of joy flashing in his eyebrows and eyes. Just as he was speculating about the role of the original power, the system had already taken the initiative to provide him with an answer. In the built.In cheat system of Traverse, this magical power of origin is like attribute points or skill points. It can directly affect his body, improve various attributes of his body, and also directly affect his skills, elevating his skill level out of thin air. However, the power of the origin should be very precious, and the system has not provided any other ways to obtain this power. Based on the current situation, it is highly likely that only by drawing the power from the holy artifact can one obtain this special point. Frank looked at the two skills he currently possesses, which are the ordinary level Viper Hunter Swordsmanship and the entry-level Demon Hunter Seal. This is the result of his years of training with the old Demon Hunter during his youth. It can be seen that the original owner of this body is not particularly talented. It is estimated that compared to other apprentice demon hunters, they can only be at the bottom level. This may also be the reason why his teacher did not tell him any news before his disappearance. Now that he has replaced his soul, Song Yuan cannot be certain whether his talent in combat can surpass his body's original owner. He didn't think deeply, but tried to improve his skill level. A few minutes later, Frank realized that if he used the power of the origin to improve his physical fitness, the amount of improvement would be determined by his own growth talent, and there was no accurate number. If you want to improve your skill level, upgrading the entry-level Demon Hunter Seal only requires a little bit of original power, but improving the ordinary level Demon Hunter Sword requires 2 points of original power. So Frank inferred that the combat skills he possessed should have multiple levels of proficiency, and based on the strength of these skills, more and more essential power will be needed for subsequent upgrades. What I just don't know is how to determine the skills he possesses by searching for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Why haven't there been any life skills, language skills, or knowledge-based skills? Can I learn other skills? Can any skill be directly upgraded? With such doubts in mind, Frank did not immediately upgrade his swordsmanship or seal skills, but instead put on the blood ring again, trying to see if he could still use the ability of this holy artifact. The reason for doing this is not only because the power of the origin is very precious, but also because his swordsmanship and seal level are currently at a relatively low level, and there is still a lot of room for improvement in the future. Perhaps as long as he works harder in the future, he can directly improve his skill level through his own efforts and apply the saved resources to other more important places. This is an attempt and also a strategy. In order to live better in this magical wizarding world in the future, he must be cautious enough. With some unease in his heart, Frank carefully put on the blood ring again and began testing its ability. Test the healing ability of the blood ring by making a shallow wound on the back of the hand. However, the situation was even luckier than he had imagined. After being drained of the power of the source, the function of the blood ring was not affected much. Instead, it became more convenient to use, as if it lacked some kind of restraint and was easier to control. In terms of his current combat effectiveness, possessing such a treasure that is almost half an immortal body undoubtedly greatly enhances his survival ability. If used together with various demon hunters' potions, at least compared to other melee losers, his combat safety has been improved by several levels. Chapter 5. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. While Frank was still immersed in his thoughts, he suddenly heard a crisp sound of footsteps approaching. This is a sound as if high heels are stepping on a slate and hard objects are colliding. However, Frank knew that there were no high heels in the wizarding world, it was the sound of the succubus's hooves rubbing against the floor. He looked up and, as expected, saw the seductive Yalbed not far away, with 2 black horns above his head and a tall and plump figure, dressed in a black cloak. She seemed to have completed her hunting, carrying a half-bound wild boar in one hand and walking effortlessly towards the position in the room. The distance between the two sides was more than 10 meters, and the other side also saw Frank sitting on the stone bed, his footsteps slightly paused as he approached. This person is very aware of Frank's injuries and helps him clean and change dressing every day. The fractured thigh and abdominal injuries do not allow him to sit by the bed. Yalbed looked up and down at Frank, then turned his gaze to the blood ring in his hand and said in surprise. Has your injury been cured? It seems that your holy artifact is very suitable for you. However, before Frank could give an answer, the female succubus put down the wild boar in her hand and walked over with elegant steps. Yalbed had a seductive smile on his face, and his eyes looked quite eager. As she took off her black cloak, revealing her beautiful body wearing only thin clothing, she extended her slender snake-like tongue and licked her red lips, speaking happily. I have a premonition that something good will happen today, little Frank. I didn't expect you to give me a big surprise. The scent on your body fascinates me so much. I endure every day, enduring not to let myself swallow you. Now, it's time to repay the life essence you promised me. Upon hearing Yalbed's aggressive remarks, Frank couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth, feeling like a little white face being taken care of by a wealthy woman. He owed a lot of debt and had no money to pay it back. Now, he has been approached by the wealthy woman to pay off the debt with his own body. Fortunately, this rich woman is particularly beautiful and has an explosive figure. Even if it's a meaty compensation, she doesn't feel particularly disadvantaged. However, thinking so in his heart, his eyes couldn't help but look at the beautiful demon that was constantly approaching him. A delicate face, emerald green eyes, fair skin like jade, pink and round, with two huge shaky masses of fat, and a slender waist and peach-shaped hips visible under the thin clothing. With such a devilish figure, even Frank, a veteran of the flower field, felt a bit overwhelmed. He couldn't even imagine how exciting it would be later. What a deadly fairy, a fox spirit that sucks human essence and blood. Looking at the beautiful scenery in front of him, Frank's breath couldn't help but become a bit rapid. As his throat shook, he couldn't help but feel drooling. Some part of his body had unknowingly entered a combat state, propping up his shorts. Sensing the man's embarrassment, Yalbed's face smiled even more seductively. She pressed her body against Frank's body, and her smooth tail wrapped around his waist like a water snake. Her too plump skin rubbed against the man's chest, and her voice was slightly sweet as she said. Little Frank, you don't need to be patient. You can do whatever you want to do to me. We have plenty of time. Under the protection of the night goddess, no one can disturb our happy moments. Listening to such a seductive speech, Frank swallowed his saliva again and looked at the rosy lips of the succubus, as well as the pink, moist and slender tongue inside. He propped up his rationality, his voice trembling slightly as he said. Ms. Yalbed, my body has just recovered, why don't you let me rest for another day? In this way, I can better serve you. Upon hearing this, Yalbed's beautiful face showed a coquettish expression. She covered her mouth and chuckled lightly, then without hesitation bit Frank's neck. She didn't exert any force, but instead sucked lightly like a kitten, speaking softly. Don't be afraid, little Frank. I won't hurt you. Our meeting must have been arranged by the night goddess. You are a special man to me. The night goddess will always be watching you. After speaking, Yalbed no longer gave Frank a chance to speak and pushed him directly onto the stone bed covered in blankets, blocking the last resistance of the demon hunter with her soft body. The inherent enchanting magic of the demon placed him in a dreamlike atmosphere, making his tactile senses more sensitive. The constantly wriggling body in his arms was like a raging flame, completely igniting the suppressed emotions in his heart. This was a battle that lasted for 5 or 6 hours, from noon to dusk, and the whole room was in chaos. The physique of demon hunters is far stronger than that of ordinary people, and even the pinnacle of human warriors cannot be compared to these magical modified mutant humans. As creatures from a different world, the Maima tribe, although slightly inferior in physical fitness to demon hunters, may not be able to surpass a Maima in strength even ordinary human heroes. Moreover, as the chief judge of the night goddess, Yalbed is undoubtedly a very special succubus. Zhaozuiyuan.com. The two of them did not enter the water inch by inch and did not rest midway. It wasn't until Frank grabbed the black horn on Yalbed's head with both hands and completely defeated the beautiful and charming Miss Charm that the prolonged battle came to an end. However, as the winner of the battle, Frank didn't have time to enjoy the feeling of his soul leaving his body, so he half knelt weakly on the stone bed. His face was pale, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Although his soul continued to tremble, his body was somewhat uncontrollably sore and soft, with an impulse to lie on the bed and fall asleep. This is a condition where the body lacks vitality. Although it is not a major problem, in the next few days, he will feel weak and lethargic, requiring at least a week of rest to barely recover his vitality. On the other hand, looking at Yalbed lying in bed, this naked and seductive miss, although she had some bruises left by being whipped when she was emotionally excited, her fair and jade-like skin seemed more smooth and smoothed than before, and could even be said to be white and rosy. The lady had a satisfied smile on the corner of her mouth and a smiling eyes. She looked at Frank beside her and said somewhat unsatisfied. "You are such a likable man, little Frank. I will prepare a sumptuous dinner for you tonight to commemorate the completion of our first contract." As she spoke, she chuckled and wrapped her flexible tail around Frank's thigh, pulling the somewhat weak man into her arms. She said happily, "Take a good rest, we still have a total of 31 transactions to complete. I can't wait any longer." Chapter 6. Just as I left the novice village, I was surrounded and beaten up. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, a month has passed quickly, and the time spent in the temple can truly be said to be painful and joyful. It is an unforgettable memory. Frank sat in the library of the Temple of Darkness, holding an ancient slate that was densely covered with various knowledge, including many long-lost ancient secrets. Across from him, Yalbed was propping up his chin with one hand, yawning lazily, his eyes fixed on the demon hunter, his charming face always smiling. Compared to a month ago, the skin of this enchanting young lady has become radiant and her temperament far surpasses that of the past, like a mother wolf with gorgeous fur and elegant behavior. Frank, who was originally physically strong and full of energy, clearly lost a circle of weight. His face turned white, his lips were slightly purple, and his eyes were dazed in the slightly sunken eye sockets. Looking at the secret slate in his hand, his whole mind was in a state of wandering, and he could hear what Yalbed was saying across from him vaguely. This is a symptom of a lack of vital energy. In a month, he was drained of his vital energy 4 times, with an average of only 1 week of rest time each time. This made Frank, a strong mutant, feel like he had run out of oil. Moreover, Yalbed is a special succubus, and this lady's love for life energy far exceeds that of her peers. If it were an ordinary man, it would probably only take 1 time and he would be directly sucked into jerky. Frank felt a sense of fear in his heart, as the prolonged lack of vitality even caused a temporary decrease in his system panel attributes. So now, when he is alone with Miss Charm, there is always a hint of love and hate in his heart. Fortunately, Yalbed was quite restrained and did not make any unrestrained demands. Listening to the conversation from the other side, he suddenly felt refreshed. His eyes lit up and he asked with an incredulous tone. "Are you willing to let me leave now?" Upon hearing this, Yalbed pretended to be angry and glared at Frank with a charming expression, saying, "What's wrong, little Frank? Do you really want to leave me?" Frank quickly waved his hand, indicating that he had no such thoughts, and soon felt some regret in his heart. To be honest, he actually quite liked Yalbed. Although this succubus lady is not a human race, after spending a month together, he found that the other person's personality is quite in line with his taste. She is not delicate or artificial, and she handles things very well. She takes on almost all of the hunting work proactively, and rarely refuses some of his requests. When it comes to beauty and temperament, it not only doesn't seem like a barbaric race, but rather like a pampered noblewoman. Moreover, the other party is indeed his savior, and without Yalbed's treatment, he might not have had a chance to be revived at all. So, as long as it's not overly demanding, he won't refuse the other party. Upon seeing Frank's attitude, Yalbed nodded in satisfaction. She reached out to gather her long, shiny black hair, and her emerald green eyes looked at the man with a hint of smile, saying, "Don't rush to show your attitude, little Frank. Although I don't want you to leave, your body is really on the verge of holding on. If I continue to keep you in the temple, I will lose control of myself and put you in danger. For your safety's sake, I must let you go out and rest for a period of time." At this point, Yalbed extended his slender tongue, licked his own lips, and then continued. "Of course, our agreement will not change. You still owe me a total of 27 times. Even if you leave the temple, I will personally come to find you when I need it." Upon hearing such a proposal, Frank was certainly very surprised. He had originally thought that he would have to stay in this temple for a year and a half, and complete the agreement with Jalb before leaving. "I didn't expect the other party to give such preferential treatment due to his physical problems, which undoubtedly better meets his current needs." However, Frank was not someone who broke his promise. After hesitating for a second, he asked curiously. "Yalbed, if I leave here and go to the northern countries, how will you find me in the vast sea of people? If I were someone who didn't keep my promise, perhaps we wouldn't meet again in the future." Miss Maymaw was not angry at the words, but said with a mysterious expression. "I have remembered your taste, little Frank. As long as I want to find you, no matter where you go, I can find it. Moreover, I have already told you that the night goddess has noticed you and will keep an eye on you. As a believer of the goddess, you are already a special existence." At this point, Yalbed's smile on his face narrowed slightly, and his expression became somewhat helpless as he said. "I even thought about traveling with you for a while, but there are still some things in the temple that I need to handle temporarily, and I won't be able to leave in the short term. So, you can go on the road alone. When we meet again, you can tell me what you've seen. I know nothing about the outside world now, you are the first person I meet after waking up." Frank nodded at the suggestion, not rejecting it. He looked solemnly at Jalb. "Thank you, Yalbed. I won't forget our agreement. I will come back to see you soon." Both sides are straightforward people, without so many hypocritical and polite tricks. In the afternoon, after a brief farewell, Frank embarked on a journey of traveling alone. Because there were not many supplies in the temple, he only had a set of linen clothes and a black cloak gifted by Yalbed, and his only weapon was the iron sword that fell off the cliff with him. Zhaozuiyuan.com. In the more than a month after waking up, apart from the battle with Miss Charm in bed, Frank practiced the most in his demon hunter swordsmanship. As a private detective, he had also learned martial arts such as free combat and free combat in martial arts schools, but had no experience with medieval swordsmanship and cold weapon ice strikes. Fortunately, time travel was a magical thing. After absorbing all the memories of the original owner, Frank was quite adept at using the demon hunter swordsmanship of the Viper School. His strong physical fitness also allowed him to unleash combat power beyond that of ordinary people. According to the memory, with his swordsmanship level, he should be considered a good player among ordinary people. At least he has no problem defending himself, and he can probably win against 2 or 3 bandits. Although he may not be able to defeat powerful monsters like werewolves, evil spirits, and griffins, he still has some confidence in dealing with ordinary monsters like water ghosts. However, before he could leave the forest where the night goddess temple was located, he had just arrived at the fork of the road leading to the countryside when suddenly a group of armed militants rushed out from the side of the road. These people wear various armor and have a variety of weapons in their hands, with at least more than 20 people. As soon as they met, these people quickly surrounded Frank in the middle, and everyone looked at him with ill intentions. As the first strong man wearing a lock armor and holding a 2-handed axe, he first spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm on the ground and then rudely cursed. "Dog-days demon hunter kid, you are indeed still alive, causing me to wait here for over a month. If it weren't for the boss's words, you would definitely be in this forest, maybe you bastard would have avoided it. Chapter 7. Black Night. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Upon hearing this rude and malicious voice, Frank immediately recognized that it was the group of robbers who had besieged him a month ago. The apprentice of the original demon hunter immediately went to the place where his teacher was carrying out his mission after his teacher disappeared. However, before he could investigate, he was surrounded by these shameless bandits. At that time, Frank didn't have much practical experience. Even if he resisted desperately, he quickly suffered serious injuries under the siege of this group of people. Finally, he had to rely on luck and jumped off a nearby cliff to have his current journey of rebirth. Unexpectedly, these guys are really haunted and have been waiting here for over a month. Is this a coincidence? Upon hearing the boss mentioned in the other person's words, Frank knew in his heart that this matter must not be simple, and there must be more dangerous people involved behind it. Whether it's the disappearance of the teacher, the holy weapon in his hand, the blood ring, or even the mission investigated by the teacher, there must be an unknown conspiracy hidden. However, now is not the time to consider these things. Frank scanned the bandits surrounding him with his spare light, watching them eagerly waving their weapons, and couldn't help but feel a little bitter in his heart. Damn it, with his current skills, 2 or 3 people may still have a chance of winning, but how could he possibly handle more than 20 armed militants? And his body is still somewhat weak. Even if he has the ability to break through and escape, he may not be able to run past these experienced robbers. Moreover, he also noticed that these bandits still had bows, arrows, and crossbows in their hands, clearly prepared for their arrival. Perhaps these long-range weapons are not very effective in melee, but if he dares to leave behind these people, he will definitely be shot into holes by these long-range weapons. Just as Frank was constantly thinking about how to escape, the two-handed axe robber led by him spoke again. Disgusting mutant cub, let's take it easy and take out what your teacher gave you. Otherwise, we will break your limbs, cut open your throat, hang your ugly head on the door, and use your skull as a poop bowl. There's no cliff for you to run away from this time, damn bastard. We've been waiting in this broken forest for over a month, and later I'll show you our strength. Perhaps it was because there was a huge disparity in the number between the enemy and us, and Frank didn't even have a piece of leather armor on him. After speaking harshly, the bandit leader didn't want to wait any longer and immediately summoned his subordinates to surround him. Looking at the bandits surrounding him from all directions, Frank had no time to think of any other way. He could only grit his teeth and pull out the iron sword hanging from his waist, ready to fight them to the death. The only thing he can rely on now is the holy blood ring in his hand, and he can only hope that this ring is strong enough to save him after killing all these 20 or so bandits. I hope that by then his body will not be cut into pieces and he can still gather a whole corpse. With the determination to fight to the death as the enemy approached, Frank did not launch an attack first. Instead, he assumed the defensive posture of a snake-like demon hunter, ready to wait until the enemy approached and exchange his injuries for life, giving them a shock first. However, before the robbers could really charge towards him, a mournful scream and the sound of sharp blades cutting through his body came from behind. Frank followed the sound and looked around. A tall figure, wearing black armor and holding a huge long-handled battle axe, arrived behind the robbers at some point. Her movements were silent, and the heavy armor was like nothing on her body. Before she started, it didn't catch anyone's attention at all. The most terrifying thing is that her strength is immense. A long-handled battle axe weighing tens of kilograms is in her hand, like a light and agile iron rod. With just a simple sweep, it cuts the 2 human bandits in front of her in half. The metal chain armor that humans rely on for pride is as fragile as a paper shell in front of this black armored knight's battle axe, without protecting the body behind the armor at all. And the human bandits who were beheaded did not immediately die. After splashing their own blood and organs all over their companions, they could only howl with fear on their faces while climbing on the ground, dragging the remaining half of their body, trying to keep themselves away from the devil behind them. The terrifying destructive power, as well as the brutal means of killing anyone, immediately frightened the surrounding bandits. The crowd scattered with a roar, all looking at the black-armored knight with suspicious eyes. The two-handed axe bandit leader, who had just been speaking harshly at Frank, suddenly hid behind his subordinates and looked there in shock. Perhaps in his career as a robber, he had never encountered such a terrifying enemy. Although he lacks courage, he has relatively rich combat experience. He only realized the strength of this black armor knight when he saw the opponent make a move once. So he immediately abandoned Frank, who was not outstanding in strength, and shouted to his subordinates. "Guys, don't worry about that novice demon hunter for now. This black guy is a tough guy, shoot him with a bow and crossbow, and others will attack him from behind. Fire oil, axe throwing, poison, whatever's useful, don't have any worries. Don't be afraid, with so many of us, he's exhausted." Upon hearing the encouragement of their own leader, the other bandits temporarily suppressed their fear and immediately gave up their siege of Frank, starting to attack the new Black Knight from all directions. However, most robbers are just ordinary people at the level of thugs, and there are few who have received professional combat training. Their attacks were disorganized and all in vain, unable to harm the black-armored knight. On the other hand, there is an old saying in the East called, "One force reduces 10 meetings." The power of the black armor knight far exceeds that of ordinary people. As long as a bandit approaches her, she will be immediately cut in two by a sharp long-handled battle axe. However, those bandits who attempt to sneak attacks from behind cannot escape the opponent's rapid personal attacks. They may even be kicked directly to the chest by heavy armor, causing their bones to shatter, and they may vomit blood and die. In just a few seconds, 7 or 8 robbers were killed by their attacks and turned into corpses on the ground. Seeing this situation, the remaining bandits were all deterred, and some timid members even began to retreat, preparing to escape. Frank looked at the appearance of the Black Knight and quickly recognized his identity. The black corners on the top of the head, the leg armor that is completely different from humans, and the obvious appearance of women's armor. If this black-armored knight is not Yalbed, who else can it be? Although the other party was wearing a quaint-looking full-coverage knight face armor, the only one nearby who took the initiative to help him deal with so many robbers was the succubus miss who had been with him for over a month. "I just didn't expect that Yalbed's strength would be so strong, and he would be so decisive in killing people. Zhaozuiyuan.com with her strong performance at this moment, I'm afraid the bandits in front of her can only make her reluctantly warm up." So, in the past month, the softness and delicacy that Miss Maymaw has shown in bed may have been just a little romance between the two, and the other person has not used their true strength. However, although Yalbed is now his reinforcements, as the person being helped, Frank does not allow himself to just stand idly by, and wait for others to help. At least, one should also contribute some value in this battle. Moreover, he still has the blood ring as his trump card, and there is still a chance to take a chance. He took a soft breath and scanned the locations of several robbers around him, silently planning an attack route in his heart. Just as everyone's attention was focused on Yalbed, his body suddenly unleashed a powerful explosive force, quickly avoiding the several robbers in front of him, and then using his shoulder to bump open a guard, approaching the head of the two-handed axe robber at the fastest speed. Frank's outburst exceeded the expectations of the robbers, and the timing was quite well timed. The bandit leader who has been paying attention to Yalbed has never reacted, but instinctively chops forward in an attempt to force the opposing defense. And just as the opponent raised his axe and tried to stop his attack with a chop, Frank didn't dodge and shouldered the chop of the opponent's two-handed axe with his own shoulder. The dilapidated iron sword in his hand was obliquely inserted upwards, piercing straight into the head of the bandit's chin and delivering a fatal blow. The screams of the bandit leader suddenly rang out, then came to an abrupt end, and the entire scene instantly fell silent. Chapter 8. Copper Whistle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, this silence lasted only for a moment, then was interrupted by Yalbed's merciless battle axe. Perhaps other robbers are still shocked by the sudden assassination of their leader, but for Miss Charm, who has lived for a long time, there are few things that can cause her emotions to fluctuate. Taking advantage of this momentary daze, the bandits immediately became the best targets. With the swing of their battle axes, the strong wind suddenly arrived, and under her merciless blade strike, they quickly turned into corpses on the ground. The black-armored saint was soaked in blood, the huge long-handled battle axe flipped up and down, and the ground was littered with scattered bodies of bandits. Since Miss Maima joined the battlefield, in less than 2 minutes, at least a dozen robbers died under her battle axe. Such huge casualties, almost half of the battle damage, completely defeated the morale of these robbers. Without the constraints of the bandit leader, the vast majority of people chose to flee, and the battle suddenly came to an end. However, the bandit guard who was bumped open by Frank's shoulder seemed to be a loyal subordinate, perhaps due to anger at his own lack of protection, which led to the leader's death. After regaining consciousness, he did not choose to escape, but waved his machete and swung it towards Frank. At this moment, the demon hunter's iron sword was still stuck on the chin of the bandit leader, unable to be pulled out in time. Frank could only endure the cut on his shoulder, let go of the iron sword, and dodged. The injury on his shoulder stimulated his nerves, and the sharp blade that hit him made him stand on end. Frank was mentally nervous and highly focused. After dodging for a few rounds, he took advantage of the opportunity for the other party to chase him and risked his life to step forward. After receiving a kick from the other party with his chest, he punched the thief guard hard in the throat. The force close to twice that of an ordinary person is quite destructive. At the moment when the fist collides with the throat bone, the sound of bone fracture suddenly sounds. The bandit guard trembled all over, his movements immediately slowed down, and he almost let go of his machete. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Frank immediately grabbed his machete and struck it at his head. Warm blood sprayed on his face, accompanied by the enemy's mournful cries and the hatred in his dying eyes. It was only then that Frank realizing how easy it was to kill. He killed 2 robbers in a row without feeling any discomfort or even any guilt. This indifferent attitude surprised Frank himself. However, after being surprised, Frank immediately realized that he had made another mistake. He did not leave a trace of the intelligence behind the scenes, and now he doesn't know who to ask for it. Turning to look at Yalbed, I found that Miss Charm had also completed the battle. Apart from a few bandits who may have escaped, there was no living person on the entire battlefield, and there were scattered corpses, limbs, and blood scattered everywhere. Frank supported his forehead and used his hand to support his bleeding shoulder, which had been slashed by a 2-handed axe. He stood up and walked towards Yalbed. Miss Maima had already taken off her helmet, revealing a delicate face with some blood stains. When the injured demon hunter approached her, she spoke with a slightly ill-intentioned smile. "Can your injury hold up, little Frank? Do you want to come back to the temple with me and rest for a few days before leaving?" Upon hearing this, Frank trembled all over. Although the wound on his shoulder was painful, he no longer wanted to taste the feeling of being drained of oil for a short time. So he shook his head and said, "Thank you for helping me, Yalbed. If it weren't for your help, I might have died in their hands. I didn't expect these guys to ambush me outside for over a month, it's really unexpected. But you don't have to worry, this small injury won't be difficult for me, mainly because I don't have the right equipment on me, otherwise I wouldn't be as embarrassed as I am now." Upon hearing this, Yalbed scanned the surrounding corpses with an indifferent gaze and nodded, saying, "I've been watching you, little Frank. If you're in danger, I won't stand idly by. However, since you want to thank me, let's add 10 more times to our agreement." After speaking, she looked at Frank's somewhat stiff face, smiled coquettishly, and then reached out to take out a black copper whistle with an ancient inscription from her chest, handing it to Frank's hand. "There is a barrier protection inside the temple. Except for those like you who possess holy artifacts, anyone who enters this forest will lose their direction. Perhaps that's why they can only stay outside the forest. Bring this copper whistle with you. When you need help, blow it and I will be by your side as soon as possible. Of course, this kind of help is not free. As for the remuneration paid to me, you should be very clear, hee. After explaining these few words, Yalbed approached Frank and lightly kissed his lips before turning around and leaving. Frank took the copper whistle and originally wanted to chat with Miss Charm a little more, but at the moment his fingers touched the copper whistle. The long-lost mechanical sound of the system suddenly rang in his ear, causing him to forget to speak. He could only stare blankly at Yalbed's back, walking on the ground with corpses and limbs, disappearing into the dense forest. Ding! I am currently in contact with the power of the origin. Would you like to learn from zhaoyuan.com? I didn't expect that this ancient copper whistle, like his sacred artifact ring, contained the power of its origin. It seems that his previous speculation that only the holy weapon ring contains the original power is incorrect. Although the principle is still unclear, this undoubtedly expands the scope of the search. Antiques, cursed items, unlucky items, and those legendary items related to various deities may all contain the power of origin. Compared to artifacts that have strong side effects and may even lead people into madness and death, it is obvious that system cheats are more secure. As long as one gains more fundamental power, whether it is improving physical fitness or enhancing the skill level they have mastered, it is an effective way to enhance their own strength. Playing with the copper whistle in his hand, Frank felt a slight regret in his heart. He gave up the idea of drawing the power of the source now and hung it around his neck. This copper whistle was given to him by Yalbed as a magical item for seeking help. He is unsure if this copper whistle can continue to be used after absorbing the power inside. Even more so, if this copper whistle is damaged due to his actions, it may also affect his friendship with Miss Charm, which is not worth the loss. However, Frank felt that this copper whistle, like his blood ring, had a subtle source of power that could be continuously absorbed by his body as long as it was placed close to him, even without the help of the system's power. In the past month, the blood ring has provided him with 1% of his elemental power every 3 days, and its elemental points have reached 46.4%. As long as you keep the copper whistle by your side, you can still gain many benefits over time. Chapter 9. Refugees. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, in 1263, within the territory of Sintra. On the desolate field, a man wearing old chain armor, with a crossbow in his back and 2 long swords hanging from his waist, is silently marching in the wilderness. He appears to be only around 20 years old, with a tall and muscular figure and a heroic temperament. His black-brown hair is tied into a ponytail, and his handsome but somewhat childish face has no expression. His sky-blue eyes are not the same as those of normal humans, but rather have beastly erect pupils. This is not an ordinary human, but a demon hunter who always appears as a villain in many horror stories and rural legends. However, unlike ordinary demon hunters, this young demon hunter Frank does not have a school emblem as a symbol of a demon hunter, nor does he have the silver sword that a demon hunter needs to deal with magical creatures. Even his armor and equipment were looted from the bandits who were defeated by the enchanting young lady. The only thing that can probably prove his identity is his unique beast pupils and the ability to use the demon hunter seal. But it's not his fault. The teacher of the missing Viper school never gave him any items that could represent the identity of a demon hunter. Even the only iron sword was a gift purchased from an ordinary blacksmith shop. The emblem of the Agkistrodon school and the armor of the Agkistrodon school's demon hunters are expected to only be obtained in the future when there is a chance to go to the Demon Hunters Academy in the Southern Empire and confirm the relationship with the major mentor in the academy. However, Frank doesn't care about these things. He's not a true demon hunter, he just inherited the original owner's memory and possessed the abilities of a demon hunter. Frank can be said to have completely disregarded the neutrality principle of demon hunters and their responsibility of helping civilians deal with monsters. According to the memory plot, it is now 1263, the time of the outbreak of the First Civil War, and his current position happens to be the kingdom of Sintra, where the war broke out. Although the exact time is uncertain, staying in Sintra is definitely quite dangerous. His current strength is too weak, and Frank feels that even saving his life in such a chaotic world can be considered a luxury. Improving his strength is currently his top priority, and as for other things, they are not within his scope of consideration for the time being. It has been 2 days since he left the forest where the night goddess temple is located, and he has traveled at least 40 kilometers. Unfortunately, he didn't have a mount, and all he saw along the way were barren wilderness and dense forests, without even seeing a single person. If it weren't for his own experience in surviving in the wilderness and obtaining some supplies from the dead bandits, he might have starved to death on the road now. Fortunately, after walking so far, Frank finally saw the village. Although there seemed to be only a dozen or so households there, he was still quite pleased. He is really a bit tired and doesn't want to continue camping in the wilderness. When living with Yalbed, I didn't feel that Miss Charm always prepared abundant food for him, arranged his life properly, and didn't need to worry about trivial matters. But it was only after surviving alone in the wilderness for several days, carrying some dry food looted from the robbers, that he truly realized what a difficult life was. Dry food, dirty river water, cold nights, wind, food, and camping, all I can do is hide in a tree hole for the night. Apart from fading bird feathers from my mouth, I have to use leaves to wipe my buttocks. The worst part is that I can't sleep well every night, so I must always be vigilant about the surrounding environment. Otherwise, it might turn into the feces of wild beasts and be pulled into an unknown corner, becoming flower fertilizer. Now that he finally saw the village, he just wanted to hurry in and negotiate with the villagers before taking a hot bath and relaxing. Thinking this way, Frank couldn't help but accelerate his pace and walk towards the village. But as he walked, the scene in the village made him frown as the distance approached. In the seemingly small village, there were about 100 people crowded, some dragging their children in mouths, some alone, some men and women, and some old and young. They were carrying backpacks and sitting on the ground by the campfire, not looking like local villagers, but rather like refugees wandering here and resting. These people have frightened expressions and disheveled clothes. Judging from their attire, they are all ordinary people. Most of them have no weapons in their hands, just bowing their heads, holding hands, and whispering to each other. As Frank approached, his outfit, which had been snatched from the robber's body, immediately caught the attention of many people. Several men holding wooden sticks and short knives immediately stood up, looking at him with guarded faces, but did not say anything provocative or take the initiative. Instead, they wisely protected their loved ones behind them, obviously afraid of causing trouble. Frank glanced at the other people with nervous expressions on their faces, and with a self-proclaimed friendly smile on his face, he spoke. "Don't worry, everyone. I'm a mercenary and I'm just here to rest in this village. I won't harm you." Upon hearing Frank's words, there was indeed no sign of great hostility, and some people's nerves relaxed. Although he did not give up his vigilance, at least he was not treated as an enemy. After seeing this group of people who looked like refugees, Frank also had some speculations in his heart. Perhaps during his recovery period, the Battle of Sintra during the First Civil War may have already occurred, and this group of people was one of the refugees who fled north to the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com under the massacre of Neverguard soldiers. If that's the case, then everyone's destination is almost the same, and he also wants to take this opportunity to leave the kingdom of Sintra and seek another way out to the northern countries. If given the opportunity to travel together, it should be easier along the way. Thinking this way, Frank bypassed the refugees who had clearly formed small groups, walked into the village from the side road, and then sat down on a more remote wooden stake, taking out his own food and water, while eating and observing the situation in the village. After more than 10 minutes, with the keen hearing of the demon hunter, he indeed heard the news he wanted to know. About a week ago, Nevergad's army surrounded the city of Sintra, not only besieging the palace inside the city, but also sending a large army to search for the surrounding towns and villages. These refugees are the black-clothed army who are afraid of the Nevergad people and are preparing to flee to the north. They are not from the city of Sintra, they are just ordinary townspeople around the city. But because this war came too suddenly and the situation was too dangerous, most people didn't have time to pack their luggage, only brought some necessary food and money, and began their escape journey. They only arrived at this village this morning, preparing to rest for the night before continuing their journey the next day. Besides these ordinary news, Frank actually heard an intelligence that made him more concerned. Among these refugees, the most influential one is a well-known local merchant family, who not only have a few young and strong workers as guards, but also have a batch of goods available for sale accompanying them. And this merchant family currently resides in a nearby villager's house. Chapter 10. Supply and Entrustment. You are listening at novel.Audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. After confirming the goal, Frank did not waste time. But in the wary gaze of many refugees, they walked to a somewhat dilapidated wooden house in the village, politely knocked on the door, shouting, "Excuse me, Mr. Andrew, could you please open the door? I want to purchase some supplies." Upon hearing Frank's shout, there was no immediate sound coming from the room. After a few seconds, the wooden door was pushed open and two burly men in burlap robes walked out of the room, followed by a well-dressed middle-aged man. After the two sides met, the middle-aged man first looked carefully at Frank outside the door and then asked with a somewhat cautious expression, "Sir, who are you? I don't seem to have seen you before. Why do you know my name?" Frank's face showed a smile, trying to make his expression as friendly as possible before speaking up. "Mr. Andrew, I am a mercenary and only joined this refugee team today. I am preparing to go north with you. The journey is long and I don't have enough supplies on me, so I hope to buy some from you." Frank's tone was quite sincere, but the middle-aged businessman named Andrew only touched his beard, pondered for a few seconds, and then said with a somewhat serious expression, "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercenary. We are all on the run now, and any supplies are very precious. At this moment, I am not a businessman, but just a husband who protects his wife and children. Although we have some supplies, my family and friends all need them, so I don't plan to sell them to others. Although I understand your needs very well, I'm sorry, but I also have to think for the sake of my family." After speaking, the middle-aged businessman whispered a few words to a strong servant beside him. After he entered the house and took out a package, he handed it to Frank and said, "However, when going out, everyone needs to help each other. Here are some bread as a gift from me to you. I hope you can also safely reach the north." Although he was rejected, businessman Andrew showed great politeness and the reason was very legitimate. He also gave a gift, which made Frank somewhat unable to find a reason to refute him. However, he did need some supplies now, so he did not give up, but advised again. "Your reasons make it impossible for me to refute, Mr. Andrew. However, as you can see, I am a mercenary and possess considerable combat effectiveness. You have just escaped from the butcher's knife of Nevergard, and the road to the north is still very long, and the journey along this way is also very dangerous. As you said, when going out, everyone needs to help each other. If you can help me, I will definitely lend a helping hand when you encounter danger. So, please reconsider. What I need is not food, but some materials that can enhance my strength. I am willing to pay a high price to purchase." After listening to Frank's persuasion, businessman Andrew's expression immediately became entangled. As a businessman, he understands the principle of harmony and wealth very well. He was just willing to give some precious food to Frank for free because he didn't want to provoke this seemingly troublesome mercenary. However, after listening to Frank's persuasion, Andrew also believed it was very reasonable. Nowadays, everyone is on the run, and with a truly skilled mercenary by his side, he and his family would be safer. Otherwise, the more supplies you have on your body, the more likely you are to be coveted by others, and there may even be a risk of financial harm. Being able to become a well-known businessman in this era, Andrew had some foresight. After some consideration, he politely invited Frank into the wooden house and asked his beautiful wife to bring him a bottle of dwarf black beer and some food. The two began to converse word by word. And from this merchant, Frank also learned more information about the war and Sintra. As he had seen in the original work in the past, the Sintra War, which was known as the first Nivjad war in history, did not last long. Before many people could react, the city of Sintra fell. When faced with the people of the north, the cruel Nivjad's black army did all sorts of bad things without mercy. Not only indiscriminately killing innocent people and plundering their property, but more maliciously, the Neptune people would capture the northerners like slaves and then transport them back to the south like livestock for use as slave workers, even calling it the spread of imperial civilization. These captured northerners generally do not live for 10 years and will consume their lives in endless torment and work. So after the capture of the city of Sintra, most of the people chose to flee Sintra and seek refuge in other kingdoms in the north, except for those who were unwilling to leave their homes and swore to never die with the Nefgades. And their refugee team, mainly from the same town and relatively familiar with each other, also absorbed some scattered refugees along the way, reaching the scale of over 100 people today. As the number of people increased, the speed of their journey also slowed down. Their destination was the kingdom of Sodden, and at the current speed, it may take up to half a month to reach. Not to mention whether everyone has enough food and supplies, it would be too unfortunate if they were caught up by the Nefgid army behind them due to their slow escape speed. For this reason, Mr. Andrew is also quite worried, but as decent and kind-hearted individuals, they cannot leave behind those slow refugees, so their hearts are still somewhat conflicted. As they chatted, Frank thought he was finally about to start talking about purchasing supplies after drinking at the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com and eating almost all the food. Unexpectedly, Andrew suddenly paused in his tone and said with a somewhat conflicted expression, "Mr. Frank, since you are a powerful mercenary, I have a proposal now. Can you consider it?" Upon hearing this, Frank put down his glass. Although dwarf beer was not particularly delicious, it greatly relieved his fatigue of camping in the wilderness for the past 2 days. Upon hearing Mr. Andrew's question, he did not immediately express his opinion, but calmly said, "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Andrew. Please speak up and I will carefully consider before answering your question." Merchant Andrew nodded and touched his beard, saying, "It's like this, Mr. Frank. Just yesterday, it was about a 2-hour drive from this village by the river. Our team was suddenly attacked by many water ghosts while fetching water there. Although there were not many casualties, there was a batch of supplies left behind during our evacuation when we didn't have time to take them away. If possible, I would like to invite you to help us retrieve that batch of supplies. As for the compensation, please rest assured. Not only will I provide you with the necessary supplies for free, but I will also pay you an additional fee. However, we do not have professional warriors, so we cannot provide you with assistance in terms of combat personnel. However, we will still choose a few men to join you in the operation. If you can successfully defeat those water ghosts, they will transport those supplies back with you.